And for more details on the EU-US trade deal, we're joined by DW's Emily Leshner from Berlin. Emily, where do the negotiations currently stand?
At the moment, it appears that a deal is likely to go through. The deal would mean that the majority of exported EU goods coming into the United States would be hit with a baseline 15% tariffs. And this includes automobiles, which at the moment are currently being taxed with a 25% levy. So certain goods would go down to this 15% baseline levy. But some goods would still see very high tariffs. These are goods like steel and aluminum, and they could be hit with tariffs as high as 50% if they're imported into the U.S. Over a certain quota. But EU officials are optimistic that a deal can be reached. That includes German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron, who met in Berlin yesterday and reportedly spoke to one another about how close the EU was in securing an agreement. And even U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Bloomberg Television that he thought the Trump administration was making good progress with the EU. So there's a sense of confidence and of hope, in part because the EU has slightly shifted negotiation tactics, and also because the EU has reached a number of deals with other countries in recent weeks. But EU officials are hopeful, but still cautious because they've been here before with President Trump.
Right. It seemed officials were close to securing an agreement a few weeks ago, and then it fell through. What's different this time?
Yes, that's right. Officials were nearing an agreement 2 weeks ago, but the negotiations stalled after Trump threatened Brussels with another 30% tariff on most goods if both sides failed to reach an agreement by the deadline we're now approaching. So that's one difference. And 30% tariffs is something that the EU definitely wants to avoid, and economically speaking, can't really afford not to avoid. So that's one difference, that the U.S. has secured deals with the U.K., with Japan, most recently with the Philippines and Indonesia. And while many are saying that the deal with Japan looks similar to what the deal could look like with the U.S., there are some differences. The Trump administration offered Japan a baseline 15% tariff deal only after Japan promised to invest $550 billion in the U.S., and that's through its acquisition of U.S. Steel. They also had a financing agreement with the Trump administration. So while people might be viewing the Japan-U.S. deal as an indicator that the U.S. will reach an agreement with the EU, the circumstances are slightly different. Finally, another difference is that the markets are doing well when the U.S. locks in another trade deal. That could be a motivation for Trump to get this EU-U.S. trade deal through as well.
And what happens if a deal can't be reached?
Well, Trump is likely to make good on his threat of raising tariffs across the board to 30%. And in retaliation, the EU is threatening countermeasure tariffs. You know, they seem unafraid to escalate the trade war at this point, saying they'll hit back with the same 30% tariffs. And this would amount to a tariff package of more than 90 billion euros worth of U.S. goods like Boeing aircraft, cars, and Kentucky whiskey bourbon. And officials in the EU are also discussing restricting the access that U.S. companies would have to European markets through what's called the anti-coercion instrument. This was kind of seen as a nuclear option, but it is being discussed now just in case. And what this would do would restrict access to public procurement, to licenses, intellectual property rights for services. It would make it very, very difficult, for example, for a digital or financial service provider to do business in the EU. Now, Trump hopes that these tariffs will bring back U.S. jobs that have gone overseas, that they'll revitalize the country's manufacturing sector. But experts are saying that the tariffs, are likely to raise prices for American consumers, that the uncertainty this trade war has evoked has made businesses very wary of hiring, of investing until things settle and until the markets aren't so mercurial. So the markets could be another reason why Trump wants to get this trade deal done.
Emily. Thank you. Emily Leschner reporting there from Berlin.